The knocking started at exactly midnight. 3 precise raps that cut through the silence of my apartment like a blade. I was still awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea gone cold, staring at the rejection email I'd received that afternoon. Another job application, another polite dismissal. The 5th one this month. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one knocked on my door at midnight in this neighborhood. We all knew better. We kept to ourselves, locked our doors, pretended not to hear the sounds from the hallway. That was the unspoken rule of living in a building where the rent was cheap, because the paint peeled and the elevator only worked on Thursdays. I sat frozen, my fingers wrapped around the teacup, watching the amber liquid tremble in concentric circles. The knock came again. 3 raps, patient, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world. My throat went dry. I thought about ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home, but the light under my door was visible from the hallway. They knew I was here. Slowly, I stood, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound that made me wince. I moved toward the door on bare feet, avoiding the creaky floorboard near the couch. Through the peephole, I could see a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat. The hallway light was dim, constantly flickering, but I could make out the sharp line of his jaw, the way he stood with absolute stillness. Waiting. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it, but something else, something more profound, pulled at my chest. A recognition I couldn't name. I turned the lock. The sound was too loud in my small apartment. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain engaged, and looked out. The man standing in my hallway was someone I hadn't seen in 5 years. Someone I'd hoped never to see again. Dante Moretti. His eyes met mine through the narrow opening, and I felt the air leave my lungs. Those eyes. I remembered them from the courtroom, cold and assessing during the trial, watching the jury box with the patience of a man who knew the system, who understood how to read people. They'd been the last thing I saw before the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. He looked different now. Older, yes, but also harder, like the years in prison had carved away anything soft that might have remained. His dark hair was shorter, threaded with silver at the temples. The expensive suit he'd worn to court had been replaced with simple dark jeans and a black coat that looked warm and well-made. But it was still him. Still, the man whose fate I'd held in my hands. "Emma Reeves," he said, and my name in his voice was like a stone dropping into still water. Low, accented, with the faint trace of his Italian heritage. "We need to talk. I should have slammed the door. Should have called the police immediately. Should have done anything except stand there staring at him like I'd seen a ghost. Because in a way I had. Dante Moretti wasn't supposed to be free. His sentence had been 25 years. We'd been told it was airtight, that the evidence was overwhelming. Racketeering, extortion, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. The charges had filled pages. "You're supposed to be in prison," I managed, my voice coming out as a whisper. I was. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I'm not anymore. Things change. Appeals get filed. Evidence gets re-examined. Sometimes justice corrects itself. Justice?" The word came out sharp, angry. I'd found my voice again, and with it, the memory of what that trial had cost me. "You were guilty. We saw the evidence. We heard the testimonies. You ran a criminal organization." "I did," he agreed, and his honesty was somehow more frightening than any denial would have been. "But that's not why I'm here, Emma. I'm here because someone wants you dead, and I'm the only person who can keep you alive." The words didn't make sense. They hung in the air between us, absurd and impossible. I almost laughed. "That's ridiculous. Why would anyone want to hurt me? I'm a paralegal who can't even get hired. I'm nobody." "You were juror number 7, Dante said, and something in his tone made me stop breathing. "You and 11 other people put me away. 6 months ago, someone started killing them. One by one, accidents they look like. A car crash, a house fire, a mugging gone wrong. But they're not accidents, Emma. They're executions. And you're next on the list." My hand went to my throat instinctively, as if I could already feel the danger closing around it. "You're lying. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to save you." He stepped closer to the door, and I saw something flash in his eyes. Not anger, something else. Urgency. 4 jurors are dead. 3 more are missing. The police think it's a coincidence because the deaths are spread across different cities and different jurisdictions. But I know better. I know who's doing this and why. Then tell the police, I said. But my voice wavered. 4 jurors dead. The number hit me like a fist. I can't because the person hunting you is someone inside the system. Someone with access to protected information, to witness locations, to everything that was supposed to keep you safe after the trial. He paused, letting that sink in. The marshals who relocated some of the jurors, the detectives who investigated my case. Someone in that chain is dirty and they're cleaning up loose ends. I did not want to believe him. Wanted to slam the door and call this the insane ramblings of a convicted criminal, but something in my gut twisted with recognition. Little things I'd dismissed over the past month suddenly clicked into place with sickening clarity. The car that had followed me home from the grocery store 3 weeks ago. I felt like I was being watched when I walked to the subway. The hang-up calls on my phone are always from blocked numbers. The break-in at my apartment 2 months ago, where nothing was stolen, but everything felt wrong, was unsettling, as if someone had been searching for something. I need you to let me in, Dante said quietly. I need you to trust me for the next 5 minutes while I explain. Then, if you want to throw me out, call the police. Whatever you need to do, that's your choice. But right now, standing in this hallway, you're exposed. And if I found you, so can they. His words were a hook in my chest, pulling me toward a decision I wasn't ready to make. I looked at his face through the crack in the door, searching for deception, for the cold calculation I remembered from the trial. But what I saw instead was something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not for himself. For me. My hands shook as I closed the door enough to slide the chain free. Then I opened it fully, stepping back to let him in. Dante Moretti walked into my apartment like he was stepping into a trap he'd already accepted. He moved carefully, his eyes sweeping the small space to take in the details. The stack of legal textbooks I still couldn't bring myself to sell. The dead plant on the windowsill. The photograph of my parents on the wall has been gone for 3 years now. Lock it behind me, he said without turning around. I did, my fingers fumbling with the deadbolt and chain. When I turned back, he was standing in the center of my living room, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Sit down, Emma. This is going to take a while. And despite every rational thought screaming at me to run, to fight, to do anything but comply, I sat. Because deep down, in the part of me that had been trained to read people during that long, brutal trial, I knew he was telling the truth. Someone was hunting us, and the man I'd helped convict might be the only thing standing between me and a grave. Dante didn't sit. He moved to the window, pulled the curtain aside just enough to look down at the street below, then let it fall back into place. The gesture was automatic, practiced, the behavior of someone who'd spent years looking over his shoulder. When did you first notice something was wrong? He asked, still facing the window. I pulled my knees up onto the couch, wrapping my arms around them like I could make myself smaller, less visible. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. He turned to face me, and in the lamplight of my small living room, I could see the details I'd missed in the hallway. A scar along his jawline that hadn't been there before, the way he held himself, coiled tight, ready to move. You're smart, Emma. You wouldn't have been chosen for that jury if you weren't. You pay attention. You notice things. So when did you first feel like something was off? I wanted to lie, to tell him everything was fine, that my life had been perfect every day. But the truth was, it hadn't been. Not for months. Maybe 6 weeks ago, I admitted quietly. I started feeling like someone was watching me. I'd see the same car on my street at different times of day, a dark sedan with tinted windows. Then it would be gone for a week, and I'd convince myself I was being paranoid. Dante's expression darkened. What else? Phone calls. Always from blocked numbers. They'd hang up as soon as I answered. At first I thought it was telemarketers or wrong numbers, but they continued to call, 3 or 4 times a week. I pulled my sleeves down over my hands, suddenly cold. Then, 2 months ago, someone broke into my apartment. The police came, filed a report, but nothing was taken. They said it was probably kids looking for easy cash who got spooked. But things had moved. My desk drawers were open. Papers were scattered, like someone was searching for something specific. They were looking for information, Dante said, moving away from the window to sit in the chair across from me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. his full attention focused on me in a way that made me feel both exposed and strangely protected. Anything that might tell them about your connections, your routines, your vulnerabilities. They're careful, professional. They don't want it to look like a pattern until it's too late. Who are they? I asked, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. Why would anyone want to kill jurors from a trial that's over? You're already in prison. The verdict was final. Was in prison, he corrected. Past tense. And that's exactly why this is happening now. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed tired, almost human. The case against me was built on testimony from 3 key witnesses, people from within my organization who flipped, trading their knowledge for immunity and protection. Without them, there would have been no case, just circumstantial evidence and speculation. I remembered the witnesses. Their faces were burned into my memory from hours of testimony. A bookkeeper who'd kept detailed records, an enforcer who'd described the mechanics of their operations with chilling precision, a woman who'd been Dante's accountant and had brought ledgers that mapped out years of illegal activity. They made the case, I said. Without them, the prosecution had nothing. Exactly. Dante's eyes were hard now, focused. 2 of those witnesses died within 6 months of my conviction. The bookkeeper had a heart attack. The enforcer wrapped his car around a tree, drunk, they said. At the time, I thought it was a coincidence, or maybe someone from the old organization was tying up loose ends. But I was wrong. The accountant, I said, pieces clicking together in my mind. She testified last. Maria something. Maria Castellano. Dante's jaw tightened when he said her name. She disappeared 3 months after the trial. Vanished from witness protection. The marshal said she probably ran, started over somewhere new. But I never believed that. Maria was scared. She wouldn't have run. She would have stayed where they could protect her. The way he said her name made me pause. There was something there, some history I didn't understand. Did you know her? Before she testified? She was my sister-in-law, Dante said, and the admission hung in the air like smoke. Married to my younger brother, Marco. She kept the books because she had a degree in accounting, and we trusted her to do so. When Marco was killed in a hit that was meant for me, something in her broke. She blamed me. She was right to. So when the feds came knocking, she gave them everything. Every transaction, every account, every piece of evidence they needed to bury me. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I didn't blame her then. I don't blame her now. Marco's death was my fault, but it got her killed anyway. I didn't know what to say to that. The man sitting in my living room wasn't the monster I'd constructed in my mind during the trial. He was something more complicated, more human, someone who'd lost people, who carried guilt, who understood consequences. If the witnesses are dead, why come after the jurors? I asked. The trial is over. Double jeopardy means you can't be tried again for the same crimes. Because someone wants to make sure I can never talk about what really happened, Dante said. My conviction was overturned 6 months ago. New evidence came to light. Evidence that suggested some of the testimony against me was fabricated, that evidence was planted, that the case was dirtier than anyone knew. The appeals court ordered a new trial. My stomach dropped. A new trial. One that would have exposed a lot of uncomfortable truths about how the prosecution built their case, about who was really pulling the strings, about corruption that went higher than anyone suspected. He leaned back in the chair, his eyes never leaving mine. But a new trial requires witnesses. It requires jurors. And someone decided that the easiest way to make sure certain truths stay buried is to eliminate everyone who was part of the first trial. No witnesses, no jurors, no trial. Just me. Quietly disappearing back into the system with a life sentence and no questions asked. The logic was brutal and efficient. I felt sick. But you're free. You're here. How? Protective custody officially. They released me while they investigate the threats against potential witnesses for the new trial. But protective custody is a joke when the threat is coming from inside. Dante's expression was grim. I have resources they don't know about, people who owe me favors. Information I kept hidden for situations exactly like this. I've been tracking the murders myself, connecting dots the police refuse to see, and every thread leads back to one name. Detective Raymond Cross. The name meant nothing to me. Who is he? The lead investigator on my case. The one who built the evidence, who coordinated with the witnesses, who testified at trial about the investigation. Dante pulled out his phone, swiped through it, and turned the screen toward me. I saw a photograph of a man in his 50s, with graying hair and hard eyes, wearing a police uniform. Cross was dirty. I knew it during the trial but couldn't prove it. He was on my family's payroll for years, providing us with information about investigations, raids, and who was talking to the feds. Then suddenly he flips, becomes the crusader, the honest cop taking down the mob. It never made sense. I stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile what Dante was telling me with what I remembered from the trial. Detective Cross had been compelling on the stand, confident, righteous. He'd talked about bringing justice to victims, about cleaning up the streets, about his duty to protect the innocent. You're saying he set you up? I'm saying he played both sides, and when things got too hot, he made sure I went down instead of him. The evidence he presented was real, but it was also selective. Things that made me look guilty while hiding his own involvement. And now that my conviction is being challenged, now that a new trial might expose what he did, he's cleaning house. Everyone who could testify. Everyone who sat in that jury box and heard the evidence. Everyone who might remember inconsistencies or ask questions. They all have to go! My hands were shaking again. I pressed them flat against my knees, trying to steady myself. If this is true, if a detective is really killing jurors, why hasn't anyone stopped him? Why isn't he under investigation? Because he's careful. The deaths look accidental. They're spread out geographically. Different methods, different circumstances. And he has help. Other cops, probably. People in the prosecutor's office. Maybe even someone in the marshal's service. Dante's voice was stern. This isn't just one dirty cop, Emma. This is a network. And you're caught in the middle of it because you did your civic duty and served on a jury. The unfairness of it hit me like a wave. I'd done everything right and shown up when summoned, and I had listened to the evidence. Deliberated carefully and voted according to my conscience, and now I was being hunted because of it. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. Why are you here? If you know who's doing this, why not report it to someone? The FBI, Internal Affairs, anyone? I tried. Dante stood and started pacing the small space between my couch and the kitchen. Restless energy barely contained. I sent everything I had to the FBI field office. 2 days later, the agent I contacted was killed in a car accident. I reached out to a reporter, someone I thought I could trust. She died in a house fire before the story could run. Everyone I try to protect ends up dead. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, so I changed tactics. I stopped trying to expose Cross and started trying to save the people he's targeting. There are 3 jurors left besides you. I've been trying to reach them, to warn them, but I can't get to them all. You were the closest. And according to my information, you're next on his list. How do you know that? Because you're alone. No family, few friends. You moved 3 times in the last 5 years. Always to cheaper apartments. Always keeping your head down. You're isolated, vulnerable, and you live in a neighborhood where violence isn't unusual. When you turn up dead, it'll be written off as a robbery gone wrong or a random attack. Just another tragedy in a dangerous city. The accuracy of his assessment was chilling. He'd been watching me, studying me, learning my patterns. You've been following me. I've been protecting you, he corrected. For the last 2 weeks since I confirmed you were the next target. That car you noticed? That was me. The feeling of being watched? Also me. I've been trying to stay close enough to intervene if Cross makes his move, but far enough away that I don't spook you into running somewhere I can't follow. That's insane, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't quite true. In a twisted way, it made sense. This whole thing is insane. You're a convicted criminal telling me a decorated detective is trying to kill me. Why should I believe any of this? Dante pulled out his phone again, tapped through several screens, then handed it to me. Because I can prove it. I looked down at the screen. It showed a document, an official-looking report with police letterhead. I scrolled through it, my eyes catching phrases that made my blood run cold. Juror casualty rate statistically anomalous. The pattern suggests coordinated action. Recommend a federal investigation. The report was dated 3 weeks ago and marked confidential. Where did you get this? Someone inside the department who still has a conscience. Someone who noticed the same pattern I did and started asking questions. Dante's voice was tight. That report was buried and dismissed as a conspiracy theory. But it's real, Emma. 4 jurors are dead. 3 are missing, and you're running out of time. I handed the phone back to him with trembling fingers. Everything he was saying sounded impossible, like something from a movie. But the evidence was there. The deaths were confirmed, and the fear crawling up my spine told me that my instincts, the ones that had kept me alive this long, believed him. "What do you want me to do?" I asked finally. Dante looked at me, and for the first time since he'd appeared at my door, something like relief crossed his face. "I want you to disappear, tonight, right now. Pack a bag with essentials only. Leave your phone, credit cards, and anything else that can be traced. Come with me, and I'll take you somewhere safe. Somewhere Cross can't reach you. And then we're going to find the other surviving jurors, and we're going to end this." "By doing what?" "By getting you all in the same room and recording your testimonies about what you saw during that trial. About the evidence, the inconsistencies, the things that didn't add up. We're going to build a case that can't be ignored or buried. And then we're going to hand it to someone who can't be bought or scared off." His eyes were intense, burning with purpose. "But first, we have to keep you alive long enough to tell your story." I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built from scraps. It wasn't much. A job that barely paid rent. No real friends to speak of. A string of failed relationships because I could never quite trust anyone after the trial. Maybe I'd been waiting for something to change. Perhaps this was it. "Give me 10 minutes, I said, standing up. Dante nodded. "Pack light, only what you can carry in one bag. And Emma?" I paused, looking back at him. "Move fast. We don't have much time. I didn't own much worth taking." That realization hit me as I stood in my bedroom, staring at the open duffel bag on my bed. 5 years of careful, quiet living had reduced my life to things that could be abandoned without much loss. Clothes that were practical rather than personal. A laptop I used for job applications. Books I'd been meaning to read but never opened. Nothing that screamed, "This is who I am. This matters. This is worth saving." I grabbed jeans, shirts, underwear, and socks. A hoodie, because wherever we were going might be cold. My hands moved on autopilot while my brain tried to catch up with what I was doing. I was running, with a man I'd helped convict. Trusting him to save my life from a threat I couldn't see or prove existed. It was wild. But the alternative was staying here, in this apartment, waiting to become the 5th dead juror, and that felt more insane. From the living room I heard Dante creeping. Not pacing anymore, but doing something. I couldn't tell what. When I emerged with my bag, I found him at my kitchen table with my laptop open in front of him. His fingers moved across the keyboard with quick efficiency. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "Covering your tracks?" He didn't look up. "I'm accessing your email, your social media, and your bank accounts. I'm going to set up automated responses that make it appear as though you're still active. A post here, a login there, nothing dramatic, just enough digital presence to suggest you're still home, still going about your normal life. It'll buy us time before Cross realizes you're gone." I should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief that someone was thinking practically about details I wouldn't have considered. "How long will that work?" "A few days, maybe a week if we're lucky. He'll be watching for patterns, for signs that you've been warned. The longer we can make this look normal, the more time we have to move the other jurors." Dante closed the laptop and stood. "We need to leave now, out the back. There's a fire escape that leads to the alley. We'll take that instead of the front entrance." "You've really been watching me," I said, and it wasn't quite a question. I needed to know the exits, the vulnerabilities, how someone might come at you. He picked up his coat from where he'd draped it over the chair. "I've been doing this a long time, Emma. Staying alive means thinking like the people who want you dead. And right now, that means assuming Cross or one of his people is watching your building." The weight of that settled over me. Someone might be outside right now, in a car, watching my windows, waiting for the lights to go out, waiting for the right moment to make their move. I'd been alone with that threat, unaware, vulnerable. The thought made my skin crawl. Dante moved to the window again, this time pulling out his phone to carefully angle a view of the street below. He studied whatever he saw for a long moment, then cursed softly under his breath. "What?" I moved closer, trying to see what he was looking at. "Dark sedan. 2 cars down from your building. Been there for 40 minutes according to the parking app." He zoomed in on his phone screen, though the image was grainy. "Can't see inside because of the tinted windows, but the engine's running. You can see the exhaust." My heart kicked into overdrive. "That's them. That's Cross. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone waiting for a friend. But we're not taking chances." Dante pocketed his phone and turned to me. "Change of plans. We're not using the fire escape. Too exposed. They'll see us coming down. We're going up instead. Up? We're on the 4th floor. There's nowhere to go but the roof. Exactly. He grabbed my bag, slinging it over his shoulder like it weighed nothing. The building next door is only 3 feet away. We can cross on the roof and come down through their stairwell. It'll put us 2 blocks over, out of sight line from anyone watching your place. This was really happening. We were running. Actually running, like criminals in a movie, except I'd done nothing wrong except fulfill my duty as a citizen. The hallway was empty when we slipped out of my apartment. Dante moved ahead of me, checking corners, his body language alert and controlled. He knew how to do this, how to move through space like a predator. I followed, trying to step lightly and not think about what we'd do if we ran into my neighbors. The stairs to the roof were at the end of the hall, behind a door marked "Emergency Exit Only." Dante pushed through without hesitation, and I followed him up the narrow stairwell. The metal steps clanged softly under our feet. At the top, another door, this one with a push bar. He paused with his hand on it. "Stay close to me. Move fast but quietly. Don't look down if you're afraid of heights." "I'm not," I lied. He pushed open the door and the cold night air hit my face. The roof was flat, covered in gravel, and dotted with ventilation units that hummed and rattled. The city sprawled around us, lights stretching in every direction, beautiful and indifferent. Dante crossed to the edge, looking down at the gap between buildings. It was wider than 3 feet, more like 5 or 6, far enough that if you fell, you'd land in the alley below, 4 stories down onto concrete and trash bins. "You said 3 feet, I whispered. "I lied. I needed you to come up here without panicking." He pulled a length of rope from inside his coat, and I wondered what else he was carrying. "We'll use this. I'll go first, secure it on the other side, then you'll cross." "That's insane. I can't jump that." "You can. You will." He tied one end of the rope around a ventilation unit, testing the knot with sharp tugs, because the alternative is going back downstairs into an apartment that might already be compromised. Cross has had 40 minutes to position people. Front entrance, back entrance, fire escape. If he's smart, and he is, he's covering all the obvious exits. Dante backed up several steps, rope in hand, his eyes measuring the distance. This is the exit he won't expect. Then he ran. 3 long strides and he launched himself across the gap. For a heartbeat, he was airborne, suspended over space, and I couldn't breathe. He landed on the other roof, rolled to absorb the impact, and came up smoothly. He made it look easy. He secured the rope to something on the other side, which I couldn't see, then pulled it taut. It stretched across the gap at chest height, serving as both a guideline and a handhold. "Your turn," he called, keeping his voice low. I looked down at the alley. The distance seemed to grow the longer I stared. "Emma." His voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "Look at me, not down." "At me." I raised my eyes to his face. Even in the dim light, I could see the absolute certainty there. "You can do this. I've seen you do harder things. You sat through weeks of testimony, looked at evidence that would give most people nightmares, and you didn't flinch. You're stronger than you think. Now prove it." Something about the way he said it, the matter-of-fact confidence, steadied me. I gripped the rope with both hands, felt the rough fiber bite into my palms. Backed up like he had. My bag was still on his shoulder, so I was lighter, faster. That was good. That was an advantage. I ran. 3 steps, 4, my feet hitting the gravel. At the edge, I pushed off with everything I had. The world tilted. The alley yawned below me, hungry and dark. My hands gripped the rope so hard I felt something pop in my wrist. Then Dante's hands were on me, pulling me forward, and I was stumbling onto solid roof, my knees hitting gravel, my breath coming in gasps. "Good," he said, and there was approval in his voice. "You did well." He pulled the rope across, coiling it quickly and efficiently. "Now we move." Down the stairs, out the lobby, and we're gone before anyone realizes we left the building. My legs felt like water, but I forced myself to stand. Dante handed me my bag, and the familiar weight of it grounded me. We crossed to the roof access door, and he opened it carefully, listening for any sound from below. Nothing. The stairwell was empty, consisting only of old concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. We descended quickly, and with each floor, I felt my heartbeat slow slightly. This was working. We were actually getting away. The lobby of the adjacent building was shabby but clean, with mailboxes along one wall and a security door that required a key card. Dante pulled something from his pocket, swiped it, and the door clicked open. "How do you have access to this building?" "I don't. But this key card is cloned from a maintenance worker's badge. Opens most residential security doors in the city." He held the door for me, and we stepped out onto a different street, 1 block over from mine. The night air was colder now, or maybe I was feeling the adrenaline drain. Dante scanned the street, his eyes cataloging every car, every shadow. "This way. My car's 2 blocks south." We walked quickly, but not at a run. Just 2 people out late, nothing unusual. I kept my head down, my hood up, trying to be invisible again. It was a skill I'd perfected over the years, blending in and not being noticed, except it hadn't kept me safe. It had just made me an easier target. Dante's car was an older, dark blue, unremarkable sedan, the kind of car you'd see 1,000 times and never remember. He unlocked it manually, no electronic chirp, and held the passenger door open for me. I slid in, my bag at my feet, and he closed the door with a soft click. When he got in the driver's side, he didn't start the engine immediately. He sat there, hands on the wheel, staring out the windshield. "What's wrong?" I asked, making sure we weren't followed, checking for tails. After another moment, he started the car. The engine turned over quietly, and we pulled away from the curb with no headlights. He didn't turn them on until we'd gone 2 blocks and turned twice, putting distance and corners between us and my building. "Where are we going?" I asked as the city slid past the windows. "Somewhere safe. A place Cross doesn't know about." He navigated through the streets with the confidence of someone who knew the city intimately. "It's about an hour outside the city, a house owned by someone who owes me. We'll stay there tonight, regroup, and start reaching out to the other jurors in the morning." An hour out of the city felt impossibly far. I'd barely left the urban boundaries in years, always staying close, staying small. What if they don't believe us? The other jurors, what if they think we're crazy? Some won't. Some will hang up or call the police. But we only need 1 or 2 to agree to meet with us. Once they see the evidence, once they understand the danger, they'll cooperate. He glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. People want to believe they're safe. It's easier than accepting that the system failed them. But eventually, reality breaks through. I leaned my head against the cold window, watching the city lights thin out as we drove. "Why are you doing this? You could have left the country. With your resources, you could be anywhere in the world right now, somewhere without extradition. Why risk your freedom to save people who helped put you away?" Dante was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought he might not answer. Then, because Maria deserved better, because those jurors, you were doing what you thought was right. You don't deserve to die for that. And because if I can stop Cross, if I can expose what he did, maybe I can clear my name. Don't erase what I've done, I own that, but at least prove that the system that convicted me was just as dirty as I ever was. There was something raw in his voice, something vulnerable. You cared about her, Maria. She was family. And family, even when they betray you, even when they do the right thing that destroys you, they're still family. Marco would have wanted me to protect her. I failed at that. But I won't fail you. The weight of his words settled between us. This wasn't just about justice or clearing his name. It was about finding the truth. This was personal. This was about guilt and redemption, and all the complicated ways people tried to make peace with their choices. We drove in silence after that, leaving the city behind. The buildings gave way to suburbs, then to stretches of darkness broken only by occasional streetlights. My eyes grew heavy despite the adrenaline still humming through my system, the rhythm of the car, the warmth of the heater, and the exhaustion of fear all pulled at me. "Sleep if you can," Dante said quietly. "We have a long few days ahead." I didn't think I could. But at some point, watching the darkness slide past, I drifted off. When I woke, the car was stopped, and Dante was gently shaking my shoulder. "We're here." I blinked, disoriented. We were parked in front of a small house, set back from a rural road. It was dark except for a porch light that cast a yellow glow over the front steps. Trees surrounded the property, thick and tall, creating a sense of isolation. "Where's here?" "Safe," was all he said. He grabbed our bags and led me to the front door. It wasn't locked. We stepped into a space that smelled like pine and old wood. Dante flipped a switch, and warm light filled a modest living room. Worn furniture, a stone fireplace, windows with heavy curtains already drawn. The owners are in Europe for the winter. He won't be back for months. Dante set the bags down and moved through the space, checking the rooms, looking out the windows, and establishing security. There's food in the kitchen, basics. 2 bedrooms upstairs. You should eat something and then sleep. Tomorrow we start making calls. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling untethered. Everything familiar was gone. My apartment, my routine, my illusion of safety. All I had now was this stranger who wasn't quite a stranger. This man who'd been my enemy and was now the only thing between me and whatever Cross had planned. "Thank you," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. "For coming to warn me. For getting me out." Dante stopped his circuit of the house and looked at me. Really looked at me, like he was seeing past the surface to something underneath. "Don't thank me yet. We're not safe. We're just safer, and the hard part hasn't even started." He was right. The running was just the beginning. Now we had to figure out how to fight back against an enemy who had all the power, all the resources, and nothing to lose. But tonight, in this small house surrounded by darkness and trees, we had a moment to breathe. And for now that was enough. I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the old house settling, every rustle of wind through the trees outside, sent my heart racing. I'd lie still, listening, trying to determine if the sound was natural or something else, something dangerous. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and padded downstairs in bare feet and borrowed the sweatpants I'd found in the dresser. The house was cold, and I wrapped my arms around myself as I made my way to the kitchen. A light was already on. Dante sat at the small wooden table, his laptop open in front of him, papers spread around him in organized chaos. He'd changed into a dark t-shirt, and in the dim kitchen light, I could see more of those scars. A puckered mark on his shoulder that looked like an old bullet wound. The edge of something that might have been a burn on his forearm. He looked up when I entered. No surprise in his expression, like he'd been expecting me. Couldn't sleep either? Too much adrenaline. Too many thoughts. I moved to the coffee maker on the counter and found it already full, still warm. I poured a cup, wrapping my hands around it to warm them. "What are you working on?" "Tracking down the other jurors. It's harder than it should be. 3 of them are completely off the grid. No social media, no listed addresses, no employment records I can access. They disappeared after the trial, went into some informal witness protection, or just decided to vanish." He rubbed his eyes, and I noticed the fatigue there. He'd been awake all night, working while I'd tried and failed to rest. The remaining 3 I have locations on. One's in Boston, one's in a small town in Oregon, and one's still here, about 2 hours north of the city. Which one are we going to first? I sat down across from him, cradling my coffee. The table between us was covered with printed documents, photographs, and maps with locations marked in red. The one closest. Her name is Patricia Owens. She was juror number 3, sat 2 seats away from you in the box. He turned the laptop screen toward me, showing a photo of a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and kind eyes. I remembered her. She'd been a teacher, soft-spoken but firm in deliberations. She'd been one of the ones who'd held out for guilty on the conspiracy charge when a few jurors had wavered. She lives alone, teaches at a community college, no family nearby, which makes her vulnerable. Does she know she's in danger? I tried calling her yesterday. She didn't answer. I left a message, telling her I needed to speak with her about the trial and that it was urgent. She hasn't called back. Dante's jaw tightened. I'm hoping she's just screening calls, being cautious. But I need to reach her in person, make sure she understands what's happening. The coffee was bitter and pungent, precisely what I needed. How are we going to convince her? She'll remember you from the trial. She'll be terrified if you show up at her door. That's why you're coming with me. She'll recognize you too, but you're not a threat. You're a fellow juror. If you explain what's happening, she's more likely to listen. It made sense to use me as a bridge, a familiar face, to make the approach less threatening. But the thought of walking up to Patricia Owens and telling her that someone was hunting us, that 4 of our fellow jurors were already dead, made my stomach twist. What if she doesn't believe us? What if she calls the police? Then we move on to the next one and hope we're fast enough. Dante closed the laptop and started gathering the papers, organizing them back into neat stacks. But I think she'll believe us. People know when something's wrong, even if they don't want to admit it. She's probably felt it too, the same way you did. The sense of being watched. The fear that won't quite go away. I thought about Patricia and tried to remember the details from the trial. She'd brought knitting to the courthouse and worked on a scarf during breaks. She'd shared cookies with the other jurors during deliberations, homemade chocolate chip cookies that had been too sweet but appreciated. She'd seemed like someone's grandmother, kind and ordinary. The idea that she might already be dead, or in danger, made something angry flare in my chest. When do we leave? Dawn. About 2 hours from now. Dante stood, collecting his laptop. You should try to rest a little more. I'll wake you when it's time. But neither of us moved. We stood there in the quiet kitchen, two people thrown together by circumstances neither of us had chosen, bound by a shared threat, and a growing understanding that we needed each other to survive this. Can I ask you something? I said before he could leave. He paused, waiting. During the trial, when we were deliberating, did you know it would be guilty? Could you tell? I knew. His voice was matter-of-fact. I saw it in the way the jury looked at me, in the way you looked at me. The evidence was strong, and I couldn't dispute most of it. Maria had been thorough. She'd documented everything. So yes, I knew I was going down. I didn't know how far the fall would go. Did you hate us? The jury? The question came out smaller than I intended. He considered it, really thought about it. No, I hated the situation. I hated that Maria felt she had to do what she did. I hated Cross for setting up a game where I couldn't win. But you? 12 people doing your civic duty, trying to be fair? No, I didn't hate you. Even now? Even knowing that our verdict put you in prison for 5 years? Even now? He met my eyes, and there was no anger there, just a weary acceptance. You didn't know the full story. None of you did. You saw what they wanted you to see. That's not your fault. The absolution felt unearned, but I took it anyway. I'll try to rest, I said, though I doubted sleep would come. Upstairs, I lay in the small bedroom under a heavy quilt that smelled like cedar. Through the window, I could see the first gray hints of dawn beginning to touch the sky. In a few hours, we'd be driving to see Patricia. In a few hours, I'd have to look another person in the eye and tell them their life was in danger because they'd served on a jury. The weight of it pressed down on me, heavy and inescapable. When Dante knocked softly on the door 2 hours later, I was already dressed and packed. We drove north as the sun came up, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The landscape shifted from rural to suburban, with houses appearing more frequently, signs of civilization creeping back in. Dante was quiet, focused on driving, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't just about warning Patricia. This was about building a case, gathering allies, and preparing for a confrontation with Cross that was now inevitable. We were past the point of hiding. Now we had to fight. Patricia's house was a small ranch-style home in a neighborhood where all the houses looked similar. Neat lawns, attached garages, the kind of place where people mowed on Saturdays and waved to neighbors. Dante parked 2 houses down, not directly in front of the house. "Let me go first," I said. "Let her see me through the window before you approach. It'll be less threatening." He nodded, and I could see the strategic part of his brain accepting the logic. I walked up the driveway alone, my heart pounding. The curtains in the front window twitched as I approached. Someone was watching. I reached the front door and knocked, keeping my posture open, non-threatening. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then the door opened a crack, chain still engaged, and Patricia Owens looked out at me. She'd aged since the trial. More gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes, but it was definitely her. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cautious. "Mrs. Owens, my name is Emma Reeves. I was juror number 7 in the Moretti trial 5 years ago. You were juror number 3. I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about the other jurors." Her face changed, something flickering across it. Fear, recognition. "I don't want to talk about the trial. That's in the past. It's not. Please, give me 5 minutes. I wouldn't be here if it weren't urgent." I kept my voice low, calm. "4 of our fellow jurors are dead, Mrs. Owens. I think we're being targeted. I think you're in danger." The color drained from her face. Her hand went to her throat, a gesture of shock or protection. "That's not possible. The trial was years ago. I know it sounds crazy. I know you don't really know me. But please, let me explain. Just 5 minutes. And then if you want me to leave, I will." She studied my face, searching for something. Honesty, maybe, or shared fear. Finally, she closed the door long enough to unlatch the chain, then opened it wider. 5 minutes. But if this is some scam, it's not. I promise. I stepped inside, and she closed the door quickly behind me, locking it. Her living room was cozy, filled with books and photographs of what appeared to be grandchildren. A normal life, a safe life, that was about to be shattered. You said 4 jurors are dead? She didn't offer me a seat, standing with her arms crossed defensively. Yes. Juror number 1, Michael Chen. Car accident 6 months after the trial. Juror number 5, Rebecca Walsh. House fire 8 months ago. Juror number 9, David Torres. A mugging gone wrong 4 months ago. And juror number 11, Sandra Kim. She fell down the stairs in her apartment building 3 weeks ago. I'd memorized the names and details from Dante's files during the drive. All of them ruled accidental. But they're not accidents, Mrs. Owens. Someone is killing us systematically. Her face had gone white. She moved to the couch and sat down heavily, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. No, that can't be real. Why would anyone want to hurt jurors? The trial is over. Moretti is in prison. Moretti was released. His conviction was overturned on appeal. There's going to be a new trial. I sat down on the edge of the chair across from her, leaning forward. And someone doesn't want that trial to happen. Someone who has a lot to lose if the truth comes out. What truth? That the evidence against Moretti was partially fabricated. The lead detective on the case was dirty. That the whole prosecution was compromised. I took a breath. And that detective is now eliminating everyone who could testify about what they saw and heard during the first trial. Starting with the witnesses and moving on to the jury. Patricia's hands were shaking. She gripped them together in her lap, her knuckles white. This is insane. You're talking about a police detective committing murder. Multiple murders. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he's careful. Because the deaths look accidental. Because no one wants to believe the system is that broken. I paused, then decided to say it. And because Dante Moretti is outside in a car waiting to talk to you, and I know that's terrifying, but he's the one who figured this out. He's the one trying to save us. She stood up abruptly. Moretti is here? The man we convicted? Yes, and I know how that sounds. But he's telling the truth, Mrs. Owens. I've seen the evidence. I've seen the pattern. And I felt it too, before he came to warn me. Haven't you noticed anything strange lately? Anything that made you feel unsafe? She turned away from me, facing the window, her arms wrapped around herself. When she spoke, her voice was small. There was a man, about a month ago. He came to my office at the college, saying he was writing a book about famous trials and wanted to interview jurors about their experiences. I told him no, that I didn't want to revisit it. He was polite and left his card, but something about him felt wrong. His questions were too specific. He knew things about the trial that weren't public. What did he look like? Older, gray hair. He said his name was Raymond Cross. The name hit like a physical blow. That was him. That was the detective. Patricia turned back to me, and I saw tears in her eyes. He knows where I work, where I live. If what you're saying is true, if he's really killing us, then I'm already marked. He's already been here. That's why we came. To warn you, to get you somewhere safe. I stood, moving closer. I know you don't trust Moretti. I didn't either. But right now, he's the only person who's trying to help us, and we're running out of time. She looked at me for a long moment. This woman I barely knew but was connected to through one of the most intense experiences of my life. We'd sat in that jury box together. We'd deliberated together. We'd made a decision that had sent a man to prison, and now that decision was threatening to kill us both. What do you need me to do? She asked finally. Relief flooded through me. Come with us. Bring whatever you need for a few days. We will locate the other surviving jurors and record their testimonies about the trial. Everything we remember, every inconsistency. Every moment felt off. And then we're going to use that to expose Cross and end this. Patricia nodded slowly, processing. Then she moved toward the hallway. Give me 10 minutes to pack. While she was gone, I texted Dante a simple message. She's in. Bring the car to the driveway. Through the front window, I watched his sedan pull up. He stayed in the driver's seat, not yet approaching the house. Smart. One step at a time. Patricia returned with a small suitcase and her purse. She'd put on a coat and practical shoes. Her hands were still shaking, but her jaw was set with determination. "I need to meet him," she said. "If I'm trusting him with my life, I need to look him in the eye." "I understand." I led her outside. Dante got out of the car as we approached, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Patricia stopped about 10 feet away, studying him. He looked back at her steadily. No pleading, no desperation. Just waiting. "Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice stronger than I expected. "I want to believe Emma. I want to believe you're trying to help. But you need to understand that trusting you goes against every instinct I have. You're a criminal, a man we found guilty of terrible things." "I am," Dante agreed. "I'm not going to lie to you or pretend I'm something I'm not. The things you convicted me of, most of them were true. I ran an organization that hurt people, that broke laws, that damaged this city. But I didn't fabricate evidence. I didn't murder witnesses. And I didn't kill any of my own jurors." He paused. "Detective Cross did all of those things. And if we don't stop him, you'll be next. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because you did everything right. You served. You deliberated. You voted your conscience. And now you're paying the price for a system that failed you." Patricia looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at me. I nodded, trying to convey everything I couldn't say out loud, that I was scared too. I trusted him because I had no other choice. We needed each other to survive. "All right," she said finally. "I'll come with you. But if I sense for 1 second that this is a trap, that you're using us for something, I will find a way to make you regret it." A ghost of a smile crossed Dante's face. "Fair enough." He opened the back door for her, and she got in, setting her suitcase beside her. I slid into the front passenger seat, and Dante returned to the driver's side. As we pulled away from her house, Patricia looked back at it through the rear window. "I've lived there for 12 years, she said quietly. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back." Neither Dante nor I answered, because we didn't know either. The truth was, everything we'd known before was gone now. Our old lives, our sense of safety, our belief that doing the right thing would protect us, all of it was stripped away, leaving only the raw fact of survival. We had 2 more jurors to find, and a detective who would stop at nothing to silence us all. We drove for 20 minutes in tense silence before Patricia spoke again from the back seat. "Where are we going?" Dante's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "Back to the safe house for now. We need to regroup and make a plan for contacting the other jurors. It's too dangerous to keep moving around in daylight. Cross will be looking for patterns, for movement." "And you think this safe house is actually safe?" Her tone was sharp, teacher-like, demanding honest answers. "Safer than your home, safer than staying visible." He took a turn onto a highway entrance ramp. "Someone outside my former organization owns the house. Someone Cross has no reason to connect to me. As long as we're careful, as long as we don't draw attention, we should have a few days before he figures out where we've gone." Patricia leaned forward, her arms resting on the back of my seat. "I want to see the evidence. Everything you have on these deaths, on Cross, on why you believe this is really happening. Because right now, I'm running on faith and fear, and that's not enough." "You'll see it all," Dante promised. "When we get back to the house, I'll show you everything. The police reports, the autopsy findings, the patterns. You can decide for yourself if I'm telling the truth." She settled back, apparently satisfied for the moment. I turned in my seat to look at her. "Did Cross say anything else when he came to your office? Anything that stood out?" Patricia's brow furrowed as she thought back. "He asked about deliberations, wanted to know if there had been disagreements among the jurors, if anyone had seemed uncertain about the verdict. He was particularly interested in whether any of us had expressed doubts about specific pieces of evidence." That made my stomach clench. He was looking for weak links, people who might testify that the evidence wasn't as solid as it appeared. "Or people who might remember inconsistencies," Dante added, his voice tight. "Things that didn't quite add up at the time but got overlooked in the rush to convict. If those details come out in a new trial, they could unravel the entire case he built." Patricia looked between us. There were inconsistencies, small things. During deliberations, some of us talked about them, but we ultimately decided the overall weight of evidence was too strong to ignore. "What kind of inconsistencies?" I asked. I'd been so focused on the financial documents and testimony during the trial that I might have missed things others noticed. The timeline, mainly. Cross testified that a key meeting took place on a specific date, and the financial records appeared to support that. However, one of the witnesses, the enforcer, stated that the meeting had taken place a week earlier. We asked about the discrepancy during deliberations, but the judge told us to focus on the totality of the evidence, not minor conflicts in dates. Patricia's voice grew more animated as she remembered, and there were photographs. Crime scene photos that Cross said were taken the night of a raid. However, in the background of one photo, a calendar was visible on the wall. The date was 3 months before the raid supposedly happened. Dante's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I never saw those photos. They weren't in the discovery documents my lawyers received. They were only shown to us briefly. The prosecutor said they were to establish the location, that the dates didn't matter because the crimes were ongoing. Patricia shook her head. At the time it seemed reasonable, but looking back, it feels like we were being guided to a conclusion, rather than being allowed to evaluate the evidence objectively. That's exactly what was happening, Dante said. Cross was controlling the narrative, making sure certain details got emphasized while others were buried or explained away. And it worked because juries want to trust law enforcement. They want to believe the system works. The highway stretched ahead of us, with sparse traffic and an open road. I watched the landscape change, becoming more rural again, and felt the weight of what Patricia had revealed. The trial had been compromised from the beginning. We'd all been manipulated, used as props in Cross's plan to take down Dante while covering his own tracks. If we're going to expose this, we need more than just our memories, I said, thinking out loud. We need documentation. The original evidence files, the photographs Patricia mentioned, and witness statements, something concrete that can't be dismissed as selective memory. I have some of it, Dante said. My lawyer kept copies of everything, even the materials that weren't officially admitted. When my conviction was overturned, we were granted access to additional files as part of the appeal process. That's when we found discrepancies in the chain of custody for key evidence, times and dates that didn't match, officers signing off on evidence logs who weren't on duty when the evidence was supposedly collected. And let me guess, Patricia said. Cross was the one who handled most of that evidence. Him or officers directly under his supervision. It's all there. A pattern of manipulation that would be impossible to explain away if it were ever put in front of an impartial review board. Dante glanced at me. But we need witnesses. People who were in that courtroom, who saw what we saw, who can testify that the jury was presented with a constructed narrative. That's why we need the other jurors. Their testimony gives context to the documentary evidence. It makes the case human, real, undeniable. We fell silent again, each lost in our own thoughts. The morning sun was higher now, warming the interior of the car. I felt exhaustion creeping back in as the adrenaline from the night before finally wore off. Beside me, I could see similar fatigue in Dante's face, the lines around his eyes deeper, his jaw tight with concentration. When we finally pulled up to the safe house, it looked different in daylight, less ominous, more ordinary. Just a small home tucked away in the trees, unremarkable and forgotten. Precisely the kind of place you'd hide if you didn't want to be found. Inside, Patricia looked around with the assessing eye of someone evaluating whether she'd made a terrible mistake. Dante must have seen it because he went straight to his laptop, opening files and spreading documents across the kitchen table. "Start here," he said, gesturing to the papers. Police reports on each juror death. Autopsy findings. Witness statements. Read them and tell me if you still think I'm lying. Patricia sat down and began reading, her teacher's focus narrowing to the pages before her. I watched her face as she went through document after document, seeing the progression from skepticism to concern to outright horror. "This one," she said, tapping a report. "Rebecca Walsh. The house fire. The report states that the fire originated in the basement due to an electrical fault, but the autopsy shows she had elevated levels of sedatives in her system, enough to make her unconscious. The official explanation was that she took sleeping pills and didn't wake up when the fire started," Dante said. "But she had no prescription for sedatives, no history of sleep problems, and the electrical fault that supposedly started the fire? The house was only 5 years old with recently inspected wiring." Patricia kept reading, her lips pressed into a thin line. "David Torres. The mugging report says he was found in an alley, wallet and phone missing, with a single gunshot wound to the chest. But there were no defense wounds, no signs of struggle. The coroner noted bruising on his arms, consistent with being restrained. Cross ruled it gang violence. Said Torres was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dante's voice was flat. Except Torres was an accountant who lived in the suburbs and had no reason to be in that part of the city. And the angle of the gunshot wound suggests he was on his knees when he was shot, execution style, not standing and fighting off a mugger. The room was quiet, except for the rustling of papers as Patricia continued reading. I poured coffee for all of us, needing something to do with my hands. When I set a cup in front of Patricia, she looked up at me with stricken eyes. They were murdered, all of them, and the investigations were deliberately botched to hide it. Yes, Dante said, and Cross is betting that no one will connect the dots because the deaths are spread out and look superficially different. Patricia stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the trees. I have a daughter, 2 grandchildren. If something happens to me, if Cross comes after me and succeeds, they'll be told it was an accident. They'll never know the truth. That's why we're not letting it happen, I said, moving to stand beside her. That's why we're gathering evidence and finding the other jurors. We're going to stop him before anyone else dies. She turned to look at me, and I saw steel in her expression that hadn't been there before. What do you need me to do? Over the next several hours we worked. Patricia recorded her testimony on video, speaking clearly and precisely about the inconsistencies she'd noticed during trial, about Cross's visit to her office, about the feeling she'd had for months that something was wrong. Dante showed us his full case file, walking us through each piece of evidence, each connection, each link in the chain that led back to Cross. We made lists, the 2 other jurors we knew about, their last known locations, and the best approach to take, the evidence we still needed. The people who might help us, such as journalists, lawyers, and federal agents, were outside Cross's sphere of influence. It felt like building something, a case, a defense, a trap for the man hunting us. As the afternoon faded into evening, Dante's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went carefully blank. What is it? I asked. A message from my contact inside the police department, the one who's been feeding me information. He read the message, then looked up at us. Cross knows you're gone, Emma. He had someone checking your apartment this morning. When you didn't show up, he sent officers to your workplace, your gym, anywhere you might be. He's put out a bolo. Be on the lookout. For what reason? Patricia asked. He can't just openly hunt for her without cause. He's claiming you're a person of interest in a fraud investigation. Says you skipped town to avoid questioning. Dante's jaw clenched. It's a cover story. Gives him legal justification to track you, to involve other departments, to put your face in front of every cop in the state. My stomach dropped. That means anyone could spot me. Any traffic stop? Any random encounter? Yes, which means we need to be even more careful. He looked at Patricia. You too. Once he realizes you're gone, he'll do the same thing. Create some official-sounding reason to find you. Mobilize resources. Close the net. Patricia sat down heavily. So we're not just running from one man. We're running from the entire law enforcement apparatus of the state. Welcome to my world, Dante said with bitter humor. This is what it's like when the system is hunting you. Every camera, every cop, every well-meaning citizen becomes a potential threat. The weight of it settled over us. We weren't just hiding. We were actively being pursued, and the resources being used against us were vast. Then we move faster, I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. We get to the other jurors before Cross does. We record their testimonies, compile everything, and submit it to someone who can take action. We don't wait for him to find us. We finish this. Dante looked at me with something like respect. The other 2 jurors. One's in Oregon, too far to reach quickly. But one's in Boston. That's a 6-hour drive. We could be there by morning if we leave tonight. Who is it? Patricia asked. Juror number 6, Thomas Brennan. He was a construction foreman during the trial, in his mid-40s, and seemed solid. According to my information, he's still in the same line of work, lives in a working-class neighborhood outside Boston. Dante pulled up a photo on his laptop. I remembered Thomas. He'd been one of the quieter jurors, but when he spoke during deliberations, people listened. He'd had a practical, no-nonsense approach to evaluating evidence. Do we know if he's noticed anything strange? No contact yet. I wanted to approach the closest jurors first. Dante looked between Patricia and me. But if we're going to do this, we need to leave soon. The longer we wait, the more time Cross has to get ahead of us. Then let's go, Patricia said. I didn't come this far to sit and wait to be found. We packed quickly, gathering the essentials and loading everything into the car. Dante took extra time checking the vehicle, looking for any tracking devices, making sure we weren't being followed. As the sun set and darkness gathered around the safe house, we pulled away, heading east toward Boston. The drive was long and tense. We took turns staying awake, keeping watch, making sure no cars followed us for too long. Patricia dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the stress of the day. I sat in front with Dante, watching the highway lights stream past. "You're good at this," he said quietly, after we'd been driving for several hours. "At what?" "Staying calm under pressure and making decisions. You could have fallen apart when I showed up at your door. But you didn't. You evaluated. You adapted. You acted." He glanced at me briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "Most people don't have that in them. I don't feel calm. I feel terrified. That's what makes it impressive. You're terrified, but you're still functioning, still thinking clearly. That's rare." There was something in his tone, something almost admiring. It made me uncomfortable and pleased at the same time. "I had a good example," I said. "You've been doing this for years. Staying ahead of threats, managing risks, and keeping people safe. Even if the people you were protecting weren't always on the right side of the law." He was quiet for a moment. I told myself that's what I was doing and protecting people. My family, my organization, and the neighborhood where I grew up. I convinced myself that the ends justified the means, that the violence and corruption were necessary evils in service of something larger. He paused. I was wrong. The harm I caused was real. The lives I damaged didn't stop mattering because I had good intentions. That's something prison taught me. Accountability. The cost of my choices. Is that why you're doing this? Trying to save us? Some redemption? Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of watching innocent people die for doing nothing except their civic duty. He shifted in his seat. "You didn't deserve to be pulled into this, Emma. None of you did. And if I can stop it, if I can use the skills and knowledge I gained from my old life to protect you, then maybe some good comes from all the bad." It was the most honest thing he'd said to me, and I felt something shift in how I saw him. Not the monster from the trial. Not the criminal kingpin. Just a man trying to atone for his mistakes by saving people he'd never wanted to hurt in the first place. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For that. For trying. Don't thank me yet. We still have a long way to go." But there was something softer in his voice now. Something that suggested maybe he was starting to believe we might actually survive this. We drove through the night, chasing hope and running from death. 3 people bound together by a verdict we'd thought was final. The road stretched ahead, dark and uncertain. Behind us, somewhere in that darkness, Detective Cross was hunting. But ahead of us in Boston was another juror. Another chance. Another piece of the puzzle that might save us all. We reached Boston as dawn was breaking over the city, painting the harbor in shades of orange and pink. The beauty of it felt surreal against the exhaustion weighing on all of us. Patricia had slept fitfully in the back seat, waking with a start every time we hit a rough patch of road. Dante looked like he'd aged another 5 years overnight, his face drawn and stubbled, his eyes red-rimmed but alert. I dozed for maybe an hour somewhere around Connecticut, but mostly I'd stayed awake, keeping watch, my body too wired with adrenaline to fully rest. Thomas Brennan lived in Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood with narrow streets and triple-decker houses painted in faded colors. Dante drove past his address twice, checking for surveillance, for anything that felt wrong. The third time, he parked 3 blocks away. "Same approach as before," he said, turning to look at us. "Emma goes first. Patricia, you stay in the car with me unless we need you. If something goes wrong, if you hear anything that sounds like trouble, you drive away. Don't wait for us." "I'm not leaving you," Patricia said firmly. "If something happens, we face it together." Dante looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Patricia's expression stopped him. "Fine, but stay alert. Cross could have someone watching Brennan's place. If this feels off at any point, we abort." I nodded, my stomach tight with nerves. The sun was fully up now, and people were starting to emerge from houses. heading to work, walking dogs, living their normal lives. I felt conspicuous as I walked toward Thomas's address, like everyone could see the fear radiating off me. The house was a pale blue triple-decker, tired